where and how frequency-specific microcurrent got started. It's important that everyone read this, but I'm going to give you some time and then we'll move right into the material. So where did frequency-specific microcurrent come from, and what does harmonizing the bioenergetic field mean? So frequency-specific microcurrent therapy, frequency-specific therapies were developed in the early 1900s by MDs and osteopaths in the US, the UK, and Germany, and used by thousands of physicians until 1934. By around 1925, medicine labeled electromagnetic therapies as fakes, frauds, and they decided that drugs and surgery were to be the only tools of medicine. Nutrition, herbs, homeopathy, and frequency therapies were basically outlawed. Every healthcare intervention, except for prescription medication, surgery, and radiation, was outlawed. Physicians who used these tools would lose their license. The research and history were lost when the researchers died. If you've ever cleaned out your grandfather's library, there were journals, Electromedical Digest, and the research about how they decided what frequency did what. All of that history was lost when these early pioneers died and their children put the books and the papers and the journals and the devices on the junk heap. Some practitioners were persecuted and some were even put in jail. The devices that didn't go on the junk heap were put in the back rooms and covered up with a sheet. So Harry Van Gelder was an osteopath and naturopath from Australia who was trained in Britain. And after the war, he bought a practice in Canada in 1946, walked into the back room of the clinic and found a device that looked very much like this under a sheet. That device was made in 1922, and it came with a list of frequencies. In 1983, George Douglas worked with Van Gelder for 3 months and brought home a copy of the frequency list, put it in a drawer, and pretty much forgot about it. The list looked like this, but there were words next to each of the frequencies that described what they were for. So there was one channel that was for conditions and another channel that were for tissues. So I met George Douglas in 1991, and I finished chiropractic college in 1994. George moved and found the list in a drawer in 1995. Now, he suggested that we use the frequencies with a 2-channel microcurrent device because Van Gelder's machine had 2 channels. So let's try it. Let's see if the frequencies from Harry's list work if we use them with the microcurrent machine. Because all the research was lost, I'm uncertain how the frequencies were derived. We're uncertain of the mechanism of action. How do they work actually? We have a pretty good model for it now, but no data as of yet. We do know that the 1920s equipment was not microcurrent, and the 1920s therapy was not FSM the way we use it now. When we started using FSM, we found out that in order to be effective, the frequencies and the current from the 2 channels have to intersect when the frequencies are applied at the same time. So according to physics, when the frequencies intersect, an interferential field is created where the 2 frequencies mix. And that interferential field, when I use the word correct, each condition and tissue has to be correct for what condition is going on in what tissue. In this field, you have the frequency from channel A, the frequency for channel B by itself, the sum of the two frequencies, and the difference between the two frequencies. I'm not sure which portion of the field produces the effects, but we do know that both frequencies have to be correct in order to create balance and harmony in the person being treated. So we first used frequencies in 1995, and our results were so positive that I decided I had to teach them to find out if the effects were reproducible. The first class was taught in January of 1997. And by June of 97, we knew that the effects were not only teachable, but reproducible. Over the next 25, now 30 years, research in animals and humans and clinical results have accumulated, and they're positive. The frequencies do what they are alleged to do, and the results have been published in 20 peer-reviewed papers. There is a medical textbook published by Elsevier, which is the largest medical textbook publisher in the world, and a consumer book called The Resonance Effect. And at this point, there are now 5,000 FSM practitioners in 23 countries. So what is resonance? What is frequency-specific microcurrent? Well, it's been established since 1997. We know that the results are reproducible, and that's important. If the frequencies are doing what we think they're doing, then the results should be consistent if the circumstances are the same. They're teachable. I teach them much better now than I did in 1997, that's for sure. And they're reliable. It's non-invasive. You can't hurt anybody with it. They're low risk. And the current and the frequencies are comfortable. It's current you can't feel and frequencies you can't hear. So how do the frequencies work? The word that we use to describe how frequencies work is resonance. So what's resonance? In physics, resonance is the tendency of a system or a bond to oscillate at large amplitudes in response to some frequencies and not others. At the resonant frequency, very small forces can produce very large amplitude vibrations. They found out in the 1800s that soldiers marching in step across a bridge could create a vibration. So we're talking 200 men marching in step across a great metal or wooden bridge. And those men marching in step can create a resonance with the bonds that hold the bridge together. And the bridge begins to vibrate at that frequency and simply comes apart. So to this day, soldiers, when they reach the edge of a bridge, break step and cross the bridge and then start being in step again. The trick that you've seen when a singer breaks a lead crystal glass is possible because there is a precise frequency that holds lead atoms together in a 70% lead crystal matrix. The lead atom bonds vibrate with the singer's note if that note is precise and matches the frequency that holds the lead atoms together. And she has to hold it long enough that the bonds vibrate and simply come apart. And the lead crystal glass appears to just shatter, but it shatters because the lead atom bonds vibrate so much that they just don't hold together. Resonance is powerful. This is the Tacoma Narrows Bridge in Washington in the US. It was built with a new technology that made the bridge thin and flexible. So there was a mild rainstorm that brought wind, but not hurricane force wind, just the normal wind that you would see in the average rainstorm. But it started the bridge swaying because the bridge was flexible. And when the swaying reached the resonant frequency that held the bridge together, this little curve turned into a big sine wave. And the bridge ultimately came apart when that frequency matched the resonant frequency that held the bridge together. And since that time, the design of bridges has changed. They make them thicker, they make them stiffer, and they make the space in between the standards uneven so that that sine wave can't appear in between. So how does resonance affect the human body? I want you to think about this. Every moving electron creates a magnetic field. In physics, if the electron's moving this way, the magnetic field goes that way. If the electron is moving this way, the magnetic field goes that way. So your body is full of moving electrons. Therefore, your body has and is and creates a magnetic field. Every organ in the body is part of that magnetic field. Every chemical and electrical bond has a frequency at which it resonates. That's physics and chemistry. Now, cell membrane receptors reasonably could be expected, actually they must have, some frequency at which they resonate. Membrane receptors are made of proteins. So the theory behind resonance interventions is that interference in between one electromagnetic field and the other inhibits proper function by creating loss of harmony between cells, organs, systems, receptors, and that interferes with appropriate function. So our goal is to create balance and harmony by removing interference. I'm going to repeat, every electrical, magnetic, and chemical and mechanical bond has a frequency at which it resonates. Now, Newtonian physics describes the behavior of large objects very well, but physics in the last, 100 years has shown that Newtonian physics falls apart at the molecular level. So it doesn't apply to the behavior of molecules, atoms, and subatomic particles. Your body is a large object that obeys the laws of Newtonian physics, but it's made up of molecules, atoms, and subatomic particles, and those are all held together by electromagnetic bonds. Now, how does frequency and current flow through your body, this electromagnetic system that is your body? Well, St. Georgie was a biophysicist, so the physics of biological structures. Water lines the gel inside cells and forms structures that acts like a semiconductor. Now, copper wire is a conductor. There's room for the electrons to zoom along. Ceramic is an insulator. All of the places for electrons to move are full. They insulate. Electrons can't move. Semiconductors, like silicon, that's in your computer, silicon crystals have one hole in exactly the same place in a silicon crystal. So that allows for the controlled flow of electrons. Well, what has silicon got to do with your body? Well, what St. Georgie found is that water lines the gel matrix inside of cells. So we think of cells as being full of water. They're not. The inside of your cells is filled with this web of gel. They call it a gel matrix, and water molecules stick to the gel, and the hydrogen atoms, so water is H, two hydrogens and an oxygen, and water, the oxygens stick to the gel matrix, and the hydrogens flicker. And when they flicker, they leave a hole for the electrons to flow through the water in your cells, in your blood, and in a controlled fashion, very much like silicon. So it turns the cell and tissues into a semiconductor like silicon, allowing for the controlled flow of current and information. So following the logic and the physics of it, your bioenergetic field is an electromagnetic system that looks solid, but it functions from a physics perspective as a semiconductor network conducting current, charge, and information. So frequency-specific microcurrent uses frequencies to resonate with interference, and when we do it right, it restores harmony. That is the goal. So biologic resonance explains the effects on living tissue. So pathogens, so this is what a cell looks like effectively. So there's the inside of a cell, except you have to imagine that it's filled with a gel matrix. This is the little protein receptor on the outside of the cell that responds to pathogens. So pathogen-associated molecular patterns, damage-associated molecular patterns, and that interacts with the cell membrane receptor that activates kinases, that activates transcription factors, that affects what genes are expressed, and that creates messenger RNA, microRNA, and that produces the cell's biological answer to whatever it sensed or interacted with up here at the receptor level. And every cell in your body has this ability. So in some cases, if you have a pathogen-associated molecular pattern, you get a paper cut in your finger, it turns red, and that's because the biological answer to the little bacteria that was on that paper or on your skin is inflammation. So that's how cells work. Now, drugs and nutrients act like keys in a lock that bind with this receptor, change the receptor, and that changes. So let's pretend this is what we call ibuprofen in the US. So it's an anti-inflammatory medication. It binds this with this receptor and interferes with this process so that the cell doesn't produce pro-inflammatory cytokines. So there's ibuprofen, and it binds chemically. All right. Biologic resonance, the data that we have suggests that the frequencies are interacting with this cell receptor like your key remote opening a lock with an electromagnetic signal instead of a key. The frequencies appear to influence cell function electromagnetically with a specific frequency signal. So how do we know that frequencies affect imbalances? Well, we've been doing this since 1995, 96. So that's experience. And there are now thousands of practitioners around the world using it frequency-specific microcurrent. So their experiences match what we found in my research. We have some actual research data, and the results are reproducible. So when we publish a paper and I teach a protocol, practitioners can reproduce the results. So how does resonance work? We're still need to understand that. So if you have two tuning forks and they're across the room from each other, and they're tuned to the same frequency, let's say 128 hertz, and you strike this tuning fork with a little hammer, they'll vibrate in resonance with each other from across the room when one tuning fork is struck. So you strike this one, and from across the room, this one will begin to hum because it resonates with the vibrations of the first one. They have to be tuned to the same frequency. So discord and interference. So if you put a piece of paper or a stick or something in between the two tuning forks, it creates imbalance, lack of harmony. And you strike this one, and the second tuning fork will not vibrate in resonance with the first one because there's interference. So think of your bioenergetic field. What creates lack of harmony in the bioenergetic field? Think about that. Feel it. Frustration, stagnation. So this is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So we start out with the basic physiologic needs: food, water, warmth, rest, comfort. So hunger, stress, and fatigue, right? The needs for safety and security. So fear, pain, and injury get in the way. Then there's psychological needs for belongingness and love, loneliness and isolation, fear, right? Those get in the way. When you have these interferences, you don't feel harmonic or integrated. Lack of achievement, frustration, stagnation. So esteem needs, prestige, feeling of accomplishment, community, right? And then the self-actualization needs, achieving one's full potential, including creative activities. This is Maslow's model, but it's interference in any one of these levels can create lack of harmony in the bioenergetic field. The theory is that if we remove the interference, it restores balance and harmony. If something interferes with the resonance, it creates imbalance, lack of harmony, and loss of proper function. That's just physics, right? You remove the interference and the function normalize. That's physics. Wasn't my best subject in school, but it is everywhere. So balance and harmony. Resonance theory suggests that if the interference is removed, it may restore balance and harmony between the cells and the systems in the body, because the thing you need to understand is in the body, everything is connected to everything in an electromagnetic sense, right? And actually in a physics sense. That's biophysics, biologic physics, the physics applied to biologic and electromagnetic systems. So frequency-specific resonance, it isn't magic. It's applied biophysics. We always have to be prudent and respectful. If the imbalances do not improve, the user must please seek proper medical evaluation and treatment when using frequencies to enhance harmony. They don't fix everything. We cannot and do not make any claims about the physical effects of the frequencies. We can only say that the frequency combination harmonizes the bioenergetic field, and that's a really good representation of what that looks like. So harmonizing the bioenergetic field with the MagHealy. The MagHealy contains FSM protocols that should be safe and effective for most people under most circumstances, but it's not a medical device. It's a wellness device to bring harmony and comfort to the bioenergetic field. It will not be 100% effective for everyone who uses it, and it should not be used instead of medical intervention. I'm really clear about that. I live with one foot in each world equally. The medical applications have its place, and harmony and harmonizing the bioenergetic field has its place. The duration, frequencies, intensity, the frequency, what we call them, and the descriptions of the frequency programmed are based on practical experience, experts, and our understanding of the interaction of frequency modulated magnetic fields and the bioenergetic field. They have not been confirmed by independent studies. So why is that? Why are there no real, well, we have a few, but why are there no independent studies? Well, there's this question that physics has never been able to answer. Are you physical? Are you made of physical matter? Or are you made of energy? Are you energy that coalesces into a physical existence? Those are big questions. So if Einstein's correct, there's no difference because matter and energy are equivalent, right? Energy is matter times a constant, in this case, the speed of light squared. Now, this equation was proven true in the 1950s. For centuries, philosophers and physicists have had this discussion, but there's no conclusion or certainty because there's no way to prove that one perspective is correct. That's why this hasn't been confirmed by independent studies. The argument continues and will continue long after I'm gone. So I published a book on how FSM was created. It's called The Resonance Effect. It's been translated into 6 languages. Jim Oshman is a PhD biophysicist, and he said such a lovely thing about it. This is a can't put it down page turner of a book. It's fascinating, funny, inspired, exciting, and altogether delightful. I had a great time writing it, and I'm really pleased that he liked it. It's available in English, German, French, Polish, Mandarin. We're working on a Japanese translation and a Spanish translation, and it is available as an audiobook in English. You can get it on frequencyspecific.com, or you can get it on the internet. If you're curious about how FSM was developed, this is a good way to learn it. Now, the frequencies do some things to harmonize the field, but how do you achieve lasting effects? Well, you have to change or create what we call a stable state. So think about water. Water is completely, it's the same stuff, right? H2O. It's the same stuff chemically, but it is completely stable as a solid as long as the surrounding environment is 0 degrees centigrade. It's the environment that creates the stable state for ice. You add heat to the system, and at 1 degree centigrade, it begins to become a liquid. And between 1 degree and 99 degrees centigrade, water is completely stable as a liquid. Well, when you get to 100 degrees centigrade, it is completely stable as steam as long as the surrounding environment is 100 degrees centigrade. So the correct frequencies create changes in the system, change the harmony of the field, and the changes can be permanent, but the patient's metabolism, attitude, body mechanics, biomechanics have to support the change in state. Right? So frequency-specific microcurrent, MagHealy harmony is just a lovely way to put it. We harmonize one person at a time, bring wellness, comfort to one person at a time, and changing even one person's life changes everything. The way they interact with the people around them, the field that they create affects the field of everyone and the world. Healy and MagHealy, frequencies for your life.